Welcome to Exceptional Leadership. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. Though my focus is primarily pointed to leadership at an organizational level, let me assure you, most of what I share will translate to almost any aspect of life. Just tweak the info to fit your leadership role. Because whether you approach my content as a corporate leader, middle manager, small business owner, entrepreneur, or as a family member or friend, you are influencing someone. The question is, are you influencing well, exceptionally well? So let's take courage, exercise wisdom, and humbly invest in the people we are called to influence. Join me on a quest, not for perfection, but absolutely for exceptional leadership. Well, we have talked about communication before. And I've said, and I'll say it again, communication is not cliche, especially when it comes to leadership. And if you're leading at work or leading at home, regardless of where that is, you need to make sure that you are communicating in the best way possible because it's going to save you money, time, energy. And I know that all of us want to have a more pleasant day no matter where we're at. So having great conversations is a key to setting us off on the right footing. Well, today's guest is Julie Crenshaw, and I am so excited to talk to her about having great conversations, exceptional conversations. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Fantastic. Now, first off, tell us what it is that drew you into looking into this topic, educating yourself on this topic. Why were you so attracted to learning more about having those good conversations?
My journey has been a little bit winding along the way, and I have worked in a lot of different settings that have required a bit of exceptional conversation skills at times. All through undergrad and grad school, I worked in department stores, and I was a bra fitter for most of that time. You wouldn't think that working in retail would be so conversationally challenging until you're having people yelling at you and calling you names and telling you that you're not smart enough to do that job. And as a bra fitter, you have conversations with people. You just think, okay, I'm going to help this person find this piece of clothing and I'll sell it to them and the day will be done. But really, in that setting, you're encountering women who've had breast cancer and who have maybe had mastectomies or double mastectomies. You're talking to first-time moms who are flying in a panic, realizing, oh my gosh, my baby's coming next week and I don't have a nursing bra yet. Or you might be finding someone who's drugged their 13-year-old niece into the store against her will to embark on the first ever purchase. And then you have women on the completely other end of the spectrum who are maybe in their 70s, 80s, 90s, who you go in there to fit them and they've taken all their clothes off before you can even get the door shut. And you're like, oh, okay, I only needed the top half, but thank you. You have to learn how to really roll with a lot of different conversations that come up and how to respond to some of these really difficult things that get brought up in those moments that you really wouldn't expect 19 years old putting in an application at a department store.
People do come in different packages, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. And you can either choose to just kind of have a bad day, or you can choose to figure out how to do a better job of responding to those types of things and connecting with people. And then along the way, at some point, I was kind of in this position where I didn't have any other choice because I would not have chosen it, but I did have to work in collections because I don't like being yelled at. Most people don't. I really hate it. And I don't like asking people for things and being yelled at because I'm asking people for money that they don't have. It's not exactly my idea of a good time, but it was something that I had to do. And getting out into the field, onto the floor, and having those phone calls, again, you're hearing a lot of things that you just don't expect. You're calling someone and the person on the other line says, well, they died last week. That's why you haven't heard from us. Or, well, I got divorced last year and my ex-spouse was supposed to take this car in the divorce settlement and they are refusing to pay it on purpose in order to ruin my credit. I mean, things that you just would never expect, conversations that, how do you handle that? You can handle it in a variety of ways, but Can you handle it compassionately? Can you handle someone picking up the phone screaming at you from the word go, and calm them down enough to the point that they're willing to hand you their credit card information and then apologize at the end of the call that they're sorry for yelling at you because you're actually a nice person after all.
Well, and Julie, I would think that there's even an art to finding out those facts. So
Yes.
they're not going to immediately come out of the box telling you what their issue is, or what has hindered them being able to make those payments, or even in your first example, these women coming into a retail environment, and some of them, I'm sure it would feel very awkward and uncomfortable for them to explain their reason for being there. So there's got to be a better way, I guess, to get people to share what's really going on in their lives.
Yes. And the last piece of my puzzle really is that I'm a physical therapist by trade, and I work in home health, and I work with the very oldest and sickest of our population. And what was really difficult, a lot of times in healthcare, you're getting people on their worst day a lot of times. They're hurting, they're overwhelmed. And a lot of times they feel like they've fallen through the cracks. They can be very reactive to the slightest thing because they're scared and they're really, really overwhelmed. But the extra piece that was thrown in when I transitioned to home health was a lot of really difficult conversations about illness and death and grief, because those are very real topics in that setting. And what really drove me to do this, to really answer your question, was realizing how many times I was stepping in to facilitate these really, really difficult conversations between two people who loved each other, spouses or a parent and child. I mean, people who really, truly loved each other, but when faced with these really difficult topics, were hurting each other a lot with the words that they were saying, with their approach. They weren't handling their own emotions very well. They were kind of lashing out in unhealthy ways. And being able to show people how to lean in to difficult conversations was something that it just really spoke to my heart, that I wanted people to know that there's a different way. This doesn't have to be something where we're all hurting at the end of it. We don't have to yell at each other because we're so scared that the other person's going to die. In some cases, in my setting, we can have these hard conversations.
One of the things that I teach often when I'm doing business coaching is a very simple fact, but it's one that most of us are either not aware of or we even forget. And I can relate to what you just described. I've been in a situation where a family member was dying and another family member was escalating in anger on a regular basis, multiple times a day. But in reality, the issue was fear. And if you peel enough layers off of anger, you will always find fear at the core. And I remember the first time that I was ever, someone shared that fact with me, I was very skeptical and I was like, no, sometimes I'm just angry because I'm just mad. And then I began to test it though. And I realized the truth of that statement. And so today I know that if I'm angry, I need to ask myself, what are you afraid of? Or if someone else is angry, I can say to myself, I wonder what they might be afraid of. And it really helps to de-escalate a situation so that I can even get to the point of verbalizing better. But I was just reminded of that as you were talking, because I've seen fear drive so much anger in the type of situation you described, but also in workplace settings too.
Exactly. I love that. And I think I had seen a similar quote that said, anger is always a secondary emotion. It's the emotion that feels more safe to express because the emotion that you're really feeling does not feel safe to express. And so I love that you brought that up, because that's something that we've talked about a lot in our house. And it's something that I really do use in my approach with other people. And in the workplace, I talk about this in my course. I have a course, Art of Conversation, 6 weeks from awkward to articulate. And I do have it. Thank you. Yes, I've had a very great response to the title. People say, oh, I need that one. But I have an entire section in there about, workplace conversations at work. And one of the things that I point out, because it's something that I really truly believe, is that we are all animals at our core, and we are hardwired for safety and security. Well, where do you feel the most threatened in your security? Financial security would be at work. And sometimes people can be so excessively reactive or sensitive in a work setting, even more so than in other settings, because there is this underlying fear of, am I about to get fired? Am I about to lose my job? If I'm wrong, what does that mean? And so people can be very, very defensive or aggressive or confrontational, or a lot of other difficult words or approaches.
Or even passive aggressive sometimes.
Yes.
Maybe they're not outwardly aggressive, but maybe they have a habitual practice of undermining and don't even recognize it in themselves, but it's because of that insecurity and fear that you describe.
Exactly. Yes. And I go over, passive aggressive, outright aggressive. I go over, how do you deal with the tattletale? How do you deal with, there's so many things that can show their faces in that setting. And I love that your podcast is exceptional leadership, because I think that it's easy to be, maybe not easy, but there's a certain level that you can get to that you could be a good leader or even a great leader. But what is that difference that creates an exceptional leader? And I love that that's the name of your podcast, because I think it really provokes that question in people. It takes a lot of self-reflection. What is the difference that creates exceptional leadership? And I think that because I was pondering this, well, what does make an exceptional leader? And I think that in my experience, both being led and being the leader, I think that there's a combination there. You have to have the skills to do your job. If you are not effective in the job, in the role that you've been given, then you can be a nice person that people are not going to follow because they don't trust that you can get them where they need to go.
Yes.
But you can be a person who can get the job done and burn every bridge along the way to get there.
Absolutely.
And that's not necessarily that's not necessarily going to give you that's not going to be exceptional leadership. You can get a lot of things accomplished, but if the people who are supporting you, if the people on your team don't trust you as a person, or they don't feel seen, you're not connected to them, then they'll jump ship if the need arises.
They will. And if there is any kind of a breach of trust, either real or perceived, imagined, then they will do that. And before they jump ship, they'll probably do a lot of damage to you and the organization and to other people. So, and I love the fact, Julie, that you specialize in interpersonal connections. We all need that, because the thing is, we all have people in our lives.
Exactly. And I love that you bring it up, that it's personal and professional, because I also say that too, that my content is not just for one setting or the other, because those skills should permeate every area of your life. That those interpersonal skills, I use the same skills, whether I'm talking to my children or my husband or my parents or my friends, or the people up the ladder at me at work, or the people who I am supervising. It's the same skills. It's the same approach.
Yeah. When I do a personality training, so I'm a certified personality trainer, and often that's the bedrock that people want me to build on. And so when I'm doing that, invariably in a professional setting, people at the break, if I don't remember to tell them at the beginning, they'll come into the break and they'll go, so does this information work with your husband or wife or your kids or your parents or your siblings? And I always laugh, and I said, absolutely. If there are human beings involved, there's human personality, and it plays a role. And the same thing with what you're talking about, the art of conversation. None of us want to be awkward. We all want to be articulate, and we all want to derive the outcomes that we hope for.
Exactly. Yes.
So tell me, Julie, you've also written a book, correct?
Yes.
So tell us what the title of your book is. And did the course so you have a digital course on the art of conversation. Did the book come before the course, or the course come before the book?
The book came first. The book is Navigating and Avoiding Awkward Conversations, How to Speak to Anyone About Anything. And it's available on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible.
Love that.
Yes, thank you. The book covers it's broken into three parts, and the first part is really a conversation 101, personal presentation, small talk skills, just all of those, the niceties. But really that can be where a lot of people get stuck, is they're really good at what they do. It's the chit chat that just kills them. They can get up and give a and I've had some of my students say, I can get up. I've been on national television, live national television. I can get up in front of a crowd of thousands of people and give a stellar presentation. It's the Q&A after that kills me. It's when I'm off script that I just fall apart. So I always address a lot of those small talk skills as well, because they're a very important piece of the puzzle. The middle section is called Dealing with Conflict, and it goes over a lot of conflict management skills that are so incredibly important, because you can know what you're supposed to do and you can be a great person, whatever your leadership role is. It can be fine until that person comes up in your team and they're having a terrible day. They're unleashing it on you. And how do you handle that? And how does your team see you handle that? And then the last section is caregiver burden, illness, and death, because that section is incredibly important to me with my healthcare role, is bringing understanding and empathy and connection to, in those situations, to people who feel very isolated and very overwhelmed. And when people are feeling isolated and overwhelmed, it's kind of like what you were saying before. It's getting them to tell you in the first place what they're thinking or what's wrong, so that you can start to build a bridge and maybe build a game plan. But that's the book. It goes over a lot.
So I love what you just shared in that third part. I want to go back to all three parts, because what I would, if you don't mind, I'd like to have you share maybe a tip from an exceptional leadership perspective from each one of those three areas. But before we go there, what is fascinating to me, so in this third part, you're focused on more end of life season for a lot of people. But I wrote a book called Getting Through What You Can't Get Over. And I focused on the fact that many of people have PTSD and they're not aware of it. They're dealing with depression and anxiety, but often it's born of unresolved grief. And just like people come in a variety of packages, so does grief. So grieving is not just because a person has died, but I think about a workplace setting, and I've seen this where there's been downsizing in a company, and there's this grief that runs rampant. And it's very similar in the pattern to what you just described, in people begin to isolate and they feel overwhelmed and they begin lashing out. And it starts out very subtly, but there's a growth to that the more that downsizing takes place. So many times people are grieving in ways that we may not attribute to mourning, but it really is that, because it's just something besides death.
Yes, I love that. And it's very true. I worked for a company that downsized a couple of years ago, and they went through 3 phases of downsizing. It's like watching a slow train wreck that you can't prevent, because it wasn't just one. You kind of knew that there were going to be these waves, and it was horrible. And it comes with feelings. I think in a lot of instances, the downsizing can come with feelings of betrayal, because, and again, it kind of comes back to what I was saying before about those feelings of stability and how very real that threat can be at work, and how acutely aware people are that if something goes wrong and I lose my job tomorrow, the consequences and the fallout from that are going to be horrendous, and they're going to be long-standing for most people. Some people are able to just go get another job and it's not that big of a deal. But other people are in situations where their finances are so tight and their situations are so very tightly controlled. Maybe they've got very complicated, at home, where they've got aging parents they're taking care of, young kids they're having to coordinate with, spouses' schedules, and this one job is fitting a very specific need for them. And if they lose that job, being able to find another one that can fit what they need. It's not just simply a job. It's a job that will do what I need it to do for me and my life. may be very difficult. And so this fear of, if I lose this stability, I'm not exactly sure what I would do or how I'd handle it, can be very, very real.
Yes. And one of the things that I share in my book is the 7 stages of grief. And I tell people, grief is messy. We don't follow those in some nice orderly little succession. They're not little stair steps. It's all over, more like spaghetti all over the place. But however, there's something really valuable in understanding what those steps are. And especially if you're a leader, being able to help your people even recognize that it's grief so that they can navigate it. And even if you could point them to those 7 stages, they feel like they're not crazy or there's not something just wrong with them. And that can be really beneficial. So, didn't mean to get us off on a rabbit trail, but I've just seen so much grief happen. And I've seen grief come from growth. People are afraid of change. And so they're afraid if things change too much, what's that going to mean to me? Or am I even going to be able to keep up? And there's all these inner things that their minds will play with. And sometimes they create vain imaginations. And then people can actually create something that they fear without realizing that they did that they were the catalyst for that. So it's really fascinating what happens to human beings. But I want to go back. So let's go back to the first part of your book. And you said Conversation 101. And if you were thinking about a leader who wanted, let's say you have someone who started out, they were a good leader, they've moved to great, but they want to go to that exceptional level. Is there a tip that you might give them for having articulate conversation with someone?
Yes, I think it's kind of funny because we've already talked about great versus exceptional. But I think that when it comes down to those first meetings, so maybe you're the person, you're all the way up at the top of that ladder, and you're meeting people who are kind of on those ground floor positions. I think one of the things that can happen, that it's difficult to walk the line between corporate and connected sometimes, because it's easy, and I can do it too. Corporate is an energy. I'm in this meeting, I'm in this room, I'm going back and forth across the table, I'm talking ideas with the big guys, I'm moving and shaking and I'm making things happen. That's a certain energy, and it can be a really great energy. I personally love that kind of energy. But the problem is that when you're bringing that really big moving and shaking and doing and deciding kind of energy to the people who are having to do the day in and day out, they're not in the boardroom, they're on the phones. And when you are meeting those people, sometimes the disconnect comes from the fact that you're bringing that corporate kind of energy to this interaction. And it creates a feeling where that person does not feel seen or heard or connected to you at all. They feel other than. And I've had conversations with people too. Some people don't see that it's an energy shift. Some people see it as almost like different groups in high school. Well, those are the popular kids, and I'm not the popular kid. It's bringing your energy down a few notches to really be able to connect with that person authentically, and to be able to really, instead of, hey, how you doing? How's everybody? High energy, Tony Robbins.
Yes. Intimidation. Yeah.
Yeah. It comes across as very intimidating. The person who's doing that is intending to be really friendly, really charismatic. The intention is still a good intention, but the unintended effect is disconnection. Yes. So being able to bring that energy down just a couple of notches to really get that person on an equal energy level, like, hey, you're working hard. It's really important. I love that. How are you doing today? But the energy is, it's a little bit slower, a little bit quieter. It's a little bit like, I just want to get to know you better. Not, I just want to get to know you better. I just want to know all the people in this room. I'm just trying to get to know everybody. You guys are the ones that are out there on the floor talking to the customers. I just want to get to know you better.
Yes, I love that. You wouldn't know this, but at the time that this is releasing, I'm getting ready to launch a digital course of my own, and it's a management certification course. So it's called Fast Track Leadership Impact, and it's for the newly hired, promoted, or motivated manager. So it's more that middle manager person. And so when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about how valuable what you just shared could be to that individual. It's something I
Mhm.
wish someone would have told me when I was younger, because I was at high energy. And when I get excited about something, I want other people to
Mhm.
be excited. And I had to
Yeah.
learn the hard way. And it took a very long time to understand that I needed to slow my speech down, lower my
Mhm.
decibel, and do exactly what you just described, which is don't let me just talk at you and tell you all the things I'm excited about, but let me ask you about you. Let me get to know you. Let's develop a relationship before I start throwing information at you. So I think
Mhm.
that's it's actually a very priceless piece of information.
It's subtle because it's the exact same words. And
Hmm.
that's why I created my course, not to get too off topic, but you can read something in a book, but I wanted people to understand the exact energy because it's the energy that makes such a big difference. It's the same words. It's how you say it that creates such a different reception of those words.
And here's the thing that I love what we're talking about right now, Julie, because oftentimes when we hear someone say it's not just what you say, but how you say it, we think
Mhm.
of that as being negative in the light of someone maybe being aggressive in what they're
Mhm.
speaking. But what you're pointing out that is equally as valuable is the fact that sometimes we're not being aggressive in the normal sense, not in an angry way, but in an enthusiastic, passionate way. But when you're
Mhm.
in leadership, sometimes your passion is overwhelming to those on the receiving end of it. And that is an insight that can help us be much more effective. And it can take us from great to exceptional in our leadership efforts.
Exactly. I love that.
So let's talk about the part 2 of your book. So this is conflict, and we all know that there's conflict in
Mhm.
every interpersonal relationship that we have anywhere. And again, we all do lead someone. So we need to remember that people are watching us and listening to us and mimicking us. So how can we take that kind of information and use that to help us have more articulate conversations and ones that have better outcomes?
I think that one of the things that creates much more success for you to be able to have a really great outcome with difficult conversations is a couple of things. I talk about boundaries a lot
Okay.
in my course and being able to understand when something is really crossing your boundary. So being spoken to disrespectfully, being verbally overwhelmed by another person, these sorts of disrespectful conversation. In my opinion and in the way that I teach, these are issues of boundaries. It's not just simply I have to say this to get it off my chest, but I am not okay with being spoken to that way. It's difficult for me to have a good conversation with you, a productive conversation, if we're saying everything that comes into our mind and being very aggressive. So for me, and a lot of the students who take my course feel that boundaries are an issue for them. And it's not an issue for all people. Some people don't have as much of a struggle with this, but I speak about it a lot because there are so many people who come to me and who are attracted to the content that I create who feel a lot of mixed feelings about how they allow other people to treat them. And understanding you have the right to not be yelled at. You have the right to remove yourself from a conversation that's out of control. So really kind of understanding what's acceptable or not. And I think this was bred from some personal things that I had going on. I had I was in band in high school. My band director was an incredibly aggressive person, and he was also a very large person. He's 6'3", broad shouldered. He would get in your face and point your finger and be very loud. And
Mm.
even as a teenager, having to learn to stand up for myself and say, I cannot have this conversation with you when you're overwhelming me like this. So being able to really understand, first of all, we've got to set some ground rules about how this can go and how it can't go before we can even move forward is
And
important. Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but even as I hear you say that too, leaders who are listening to this, I want you to hear what Julie's saying. So for many of the people that you are responsible for, they are not truly going to have the wherewithal to vocalize that. But as a leader whose job is to care for the people that you're responsible for, you can set those boundaries, and you could do that early. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I teach is don't wait until you're in a conflict and hope you're going to be able to pull it all together. Instead, prepare in advance. Speak clearly to your team about what those boundaries are and what's acceptable and what isn't. And also be willing, have the inner strength and courage to say to your people, I'm human too. Sometimes I forget things that I know. Sometimes in the heat of a moment, my emotions can get the better of me. So I want to give you permission right now that if I'm starting to cross boundaries in a respectful way, then I give you that permission to let me know that. Let me know that I'm crossing a line. If you do that and you set that tone early before there's a conflict, when the conflict comes, you will not believe how much faster you're going to be able to diffuse that. And oftentimes, your very own people can protect you from you. They can help you get a handle on yourself so you don't let those emotions drive you so that you make a mistake that you can't take back and that may take weeks or months to try to recover from.
And I talk a lot in my course. I talk about it in the book, but I deep dive on it in the course about fight or flight, because it is 100% the prevailing difficulty when you're having conflict. You are in a fight or flight. The other person is having a fight or flight response. And if you can understand what that is, what it means, how to calm it down in you, and how to facilitate calming it down in the other person, you cannot have a productive conversation with someone when one or the other of you are spiraling. And so being able to understand, okay, my heart is racing, my thoughts are racing, I'm shaking, maybe the other person can't see it, but on the inside, I am shaking right now because I'm being yelled at. You don't have to be the aggressor. Someone being aggressive with you absolutely triggers a fight or flight response in your body. And if you can recognize it first and deal with that first, and this is coming back a lot to my days in collections, but you'd be surprised how much I use the skill in healthcare. The person is screaming at me and I'm having to understand, because they're yelling at me, my body, I'm having a full body reaction to that right now. I have to first spend a couple of seconds tuning in with myself and calming myself down. And the next thing that I need to do, and I talk specifically in my course about a lot of very effective approaches for helping to calm the other person, but to touch on one point, making sure that your voice remains calm.
Yes.
So that you're not exacerbating the situation. And it cannot be patronizing and it cannot be condescending. It has to be a tone of collaboration. Like, okay, I understand. I can tell that you're really frustrated right now, but I need everything to calm down first before we can talk about this. Okay, yeah. I really need, yeah.
One of my favorite proverbs is a gentle answer turns away wrath. And years ago, I set out to use that proverb in a very practical way. And so I trained my body to connect to my mind so that when there was any kind of a conflict and someone was coming toward me aggressively, I would do this. And I can still do it today. But I would connect my hands behind my back. So it opens my body language up immediately. But, and at the first I had to be very intentional to think all of this through. Today it's just natural. But when I do that, that is also a positive trigger for me to remind me to speak more slowly and keep my voice at a calmer decibel. And when I speak more gently, then what happens, even if someone is coming and they're speaking really fast and they're really loud and they're decibel and they're screaming and cussing and carrying on, if you continue to stay calm, what happens is we as human beings match emotion. So if someone is at a high intensity emotion, if we are not intentional, we will escalate and match that emotion. But if we bring our emotion down and we speak more calmly without even realizing they're doing it subconsciously, they will begin to diffuse themselves. And it works
Exactly.
beautifully. But again, you can't wait until you're in the moment. You've got to have a strategy, a conflict management strategy in advance and not wait until the conflict comes.
Yes. And that, for me, the difference is they always say, you got to say what makes you different. What makes what I do a different or unique, or the thing that I feel is so incredibly important, is that how piece. So it's really easy to talk in theories and to say you have to stay calm. But I'm a person that if you can't explain to me why or how, it's great information, but I cannot implement it. I can't integrate that into what I'm doing. And so I try very hard in every piece of my content and every single thing that I create and do to explain why and how, because simply saying to stay calm sounds great,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not that simple. And so I think that what you're talking about is perfect, of the body language piece and the effect through your voice piece and eliciting that mirroring response. And most of the time, that's all it takes. There are certain instances where it's not enough. That person really is so ramped up that you have to start making comments. I need things to be respectful if we're going to be able to have this conversation. I want to speak with you. I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to see what I can do to help. But this situation feels overwhelming to me right now. And I really, really need for us to be able to calm down so that we can have this conversation, because I do want to help you, but it's really hard for me to think right now with the energy so high in here.
Exactly. And that's
How do you
yes.
mm-hmm.
And that's perfectly acceptable, but sometimes we don't realize that in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So again, having that understanding in advance is very beneficial. And as
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about that, I was thinking about the power of our facial language, because it's not just what we vocalize, it's also what we're wearing. And I've noticed oftentimes in conflict that people, they're not paying attention to what their face is saying to that other person. So if you smile or smirk, that sends a message. If you have a furrowed brow and your jaws are clenched, then that is something else that it sends that message, and probably not the message that you want. So what are your thoughts on facial expressions and body language and what that does in conversation?
It's so funny. I actually have a video coming out next week on my YouTube channel about that
Awesome.
exact topic, that facial expression, because again, we are animals deep down on the inside, and our brains are hardwired to perceive at a micro level any sort of danger. And so our brains are impressively capable of understanding and receiving information from the most minute facial expression changes. We have to be able to do that. If you go back to being not in modern technology age, and we're going back to the caveman days, I have to be able to anticipate, are you about to turn on me? Are you about to fight with me? Are things about to get dangerous? You have to be able to perceive that. Our brains are acutely aware of the smallest changes in other people's facial expression, especially when emotions are high. Our brains are actually in overdrive, trying to detect as much information as possible from that other person. And we're going on facial expression and body language. And so one of the things that I talk about in a lot of my content is this whole resting angry face. And you hear a lot of conflicting feelings of people saying, well, it's just how I am. It's just how my face is. It's just how I look. People should get over it. And my response to that is, I understand that on the inside, you feel a certain way and you don't want to have to change who you are, but you have to understand that that person doesn't have anything else to go on except your facial expression and your body language. And if what you are projecting into the room looks like anger or discomfort or disgust, that is what that other person is receiving. So it's not about being fake, because a lot of people say, I don't want to be fake. I don't want to smile all the time. That's not my personality. It's not about being fake. It's about aligning what you look like on the outside to how you feel on the inside. If I want to have a conversation with you, if I'm at this convention or trade show or meet and greet, and I want to connect with other people, but I look like I'm really angry, they're not going to approach me because I'm sending off this huge, strong signal that something's wrong. Maybe I'm in a bad mood. Maybe I'm going to bite their head off. Maybe I'm mad at them. Maybe I don't want to talk to them. And just trying to stand on this hill of, well, I don't want to be fake, or that's not who I am, thinking about it and approaching it in the wrong way. It's not about being fake. It's about making sure that the look on your face matches how you feel on the inside. If I want to speak to other people, I need to have a look on my face that says, hi, everybody. I'm really glad to have a conversation right now. I'd really love to speak to anybody who wants to come up and speak with me.
In leadership, a lot of times there's look, again, we're human beings, right? We're not robots. So we have all of these emotions. And one of those emotional lies that we'll tell ourselves is displayed in that when we say, well, that's just how I am, and they just need to get used to it. We make it about the other person instead of taking responsibility and saying, maybe I'm being stubborn right now. And if I want certain results, maybe I need to get past my own stubbornness, and I need to be willing to work with other people where they are and stop just digging my heels in like a mule. But too often leaders get in their own way, but they don't recognize that they are either part of the problem or the reason for the problem. They're just too busy blaming other people because they won't take that personal responsibility.
Yeah. And sometimes it's coming from that place. Sometimes it's coming from somebody who is very socially anxious. And they are scared out of their mind to be in that room, and they want to because they know it's good for their career, or there is a part of them that really does want to connect with everyone else, but the social anxiety is getting to them. And so they're projecting the social anxiety, which is what's being received by everybody else, when it's not what they want. But being able to cross that bridge is difficult. But that is one thing that I work with people a lot in my courses. A lot of people, I had a student who came to me and she said, I have this quiz that I give people at the beginning of the course that assesses their comfort and confidence in a wide variety of areas. And then they take that quiz again at the end of the course. And when I got her results back, I knew her and I got her results back. And I thought, did she fake this? Like, was she just kind of answering really bad to, I don't know, give a good result at the end? I was confused, and I actually reached out to her because I did know her, and I said, I'm just checking, but did you answer this quiz honestly? Do you really feel that uncomfortable and that awkward in those situations? And she said, oh yeah, absolutely. And I said, but I know her career. You handled multi-million-dollar books. You've been in huge corporate rooms. You're a very capable and smart and accomplished person. And she said, yeah. And I pretty much throw up before any time I have to go out and speak. And I after I have a big event, I basically have to lay down for the rest of the day because I'm so spent. And I was like, really? Well, so and it's not always obvious.
Right, exactly. And a lot of the leaders I work with are very similar to her. They carry a lot of anxiety, a lot of insecurity, but they try to cover it with this confident persona. And sometimes they overcompensate in that area, and it becomes its own detriment, where in reality, if they were just a little bit more honest about some of their human challenges, then they would probably appear more relevant to other people, which goes back to they would probably have better interpersonal connections with those that they're trying to lead. And it would get them where they want to go faster.
Exactly. Yes. So giving people my experience is that people who experience a lot of social anxiety, whether that's personal or professional, there's a lot of self-doubt and a lot of circular thinking. And what I do in my course and what I have had good results with is giving people a checklist. If you can do this and do this and do this, you're gold. And it helps them to run through that checklist in their mind. Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Am I doing that? And when they can check all those boxes and go, yes, I'm doing the optimal thing. I'm optimizing my approach. I'm optimizing how I'm handling this situation, that it helps that person to feel more confident that they're doing it right and they're going to be perceived well and that the outcome is going to be the outcome that they want. And that's what's building that confidence, is to know, okay, if I can check these 4 to 6 boxes of, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I approach it this way? Then I know that I should have the result that I want. And it helps them to calm down and approach it in a better way and actually get the results that they want.
And that's exactly why people like you and I are doing what we do to try to help others have authentic confidence, to lead exceptionally well, to make the difference that they're made for, and to have positive interactions with other people. Well, Julie, thank you. This has been so fascinating. I love the work that you're doing. I am so grateful that you are out there teaching people how to have better conversations, because if we can't communicate clearly, articulately, if we can't communicate in a way that's going to help people feel more comfortable and confident and positive, then none of us are going to get where we want to go. So thank you for the work you're doing. I also do a lot of work in the healthcare area, a lot of trainings and speaking to those types of groups. And I have such a heart for those folks who are in those trenches, and not just those like that are the nurses or the doctors, but the administrators who are treated so invisibly sometimes, but they're working every bit as hard, or those who are working on the front lines of emergency services and folks like that. So thank you for specializing in reaching those folks. I know you can reach any human being, but especially for those, because let's face it, the health of humanity relies on those who are willing to serve in that capacity.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope maybe you'll come back and visit with me again sometime in the future. And so I want to again mention your course. So it's Art of Conversation, 6 weeks from awkward to articulate, and your book, Navigating and Avoiding Awkward Conversations. And is there a place that people can go to find more about you? Do you have a website or social media pages you'd like to mention?
Yes, my website is yourconversationexpert.com. And from there, you can find links to all of my socials, but I'm also on YouTube. I give weekly videos every Wednesday that goes over a certain aspect of this topic. And I'm very, very active on Instagram. So my handle there is also at yourconversationexpert.
Perfect. Well, again, Julie, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you. I have really enjoyed it. I'd love to come back.
Awesome. And listeners, for you, just think about, as you are leading anyone in life, and we talk about being exceptional, get more specific. Think about what Julie shared. How exceptional are your conversations? How exceptional is your communication? Are you doing it early? Are you doing it often? Is it clear? Is it concise? And does your face and body language match the words that you're saying? Does your tone and your decibel get you where you want to go? If not, in this moment, you can begin to make that change, because it all comes down to intentionality. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. And I just want to remind you of a truth. If you are not leading at the level that you want to be at, remember, it is never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith. You can start today. You can start making a difference. You can help the world become a better place. You can begin to lead with intent. Your family, your friends, the people you work with, your community, in your church, in our nation, across the planet. Whatever opportunities come your way, remember that did not happen by accident. And by stepping up and leading exceptionally well, you will help fulfill the purpose you were created for.